Hey there, I'm Mr. K, and welcome to today's video or today's lecture. We're going to kind of finish up this part of talking about how to identify and explain claims and evidence within an argument. Specifically, this lesson is about how to introduce and embed quoted, paraphrased, or summarized information from outside sources. All right, how to do that process. Very, very important. This is, all of these things that we're talking about for AP Lang. What I hope students are getting is that it's obviously helpful for AP Lang, and I hope it's good preparation for the exam. But this is helpful outside of the exam. This is one of those writing skills that we have to have. We have to be able to use other people's words or ideas, but do so appropriately, do so and give them credit, right? And so, I've said that throughout these videos that, this information I'm using is straight from CollegeBoard. They give those daily videos out for students. Some students don't have access. Some people want to take the exam who don't have access to the daily videos, right? I'm using their information. I'm using their resources, so I'm giving credit where credit is due, and we as writers, we really have to do the same thing. All right, so that's what this lesson is all about. All right, so let's look at the goals. So first, we want to understand how writers use evidence in their own work, and we want to understand, or we need to understand, how evidence is incorporated into their writing. So how do we format that, and how do we take a quote or a paraphrase or a summary and inject it into kind of the flow of an argument, and instead of just dropping it in the paper randomly, right? How do we get it so it's part of the whole movement, right? That's what we're doing. Okay, so we've looked at this a couple of times at this point, but the most basic elements of an argument, we start at the top here. We have our main idea, or what we are, the conclusion we are coming to, or the thesis, right? That typically goes at the end of the intro paragraph. Of course, that's a very formulaic way to do it, but it's helpful. I tell my students that, to make sure your thesis is at the end of the intro. Now, as you get more sophisticated and, later in the year, if you want to kind of start experimenting more, you can. But typically, that goes at the end of the first intro. And then we have at the bottom our body paragraphs, in this case, 4. It could be 2, 3, 4, whatever. But each body paragraph has its reason, right? The kind of point of that body paragraph, that kind of topic sentence. What is the idea, the main idea for this paragraph, right? So that's the reason, and then the evidence, right? However many pieces of evidence it happens to be for that part of the argument, right? So we're starting to kind of place these things, not just identify what they are, but you can see, I hope, that the structure of an essay starting to come out. Your intro, then your reason, evidence, and we'll look at that more, but that's the idea, right? So what do writers do? Well, among other things, the good ones select and embed evidence to support their claim. So the most common methods to do this, to incorporate others' writing into their argument, there's 3 ways really that they do this. First, you could do a quote. We know what a quote is, but it's a word or sentence or sentences taken word for word from a source and enclosed in quotation marks. All right, and we'll look at an example of that, but that is straight up like, what did the person say word for word, right? And you got to have the quotation marks, of course. You could also paraphrase, all right? This is rephrasing in your own words and your own sentence structure of a portion of a source that is about the same length as the original sentence or sentences that you're paraphrasing. All right, so if it's a single sentence and it's, give or take, 18, 19, 20 words, if you're paraphrasing, what you're doing is putting it in your own words, in your own kind of structure, but you are changing the words. You are rephrasing that source. But since it's still following, obviously, so closely to that original source, and that's where you're getting the information, you have to embed that and cite it correctly. And then the summary is shorter than the original source, and it presents the central idea in your own words. So instead of paraphrasing where you turn a phrase to a phrase, or a sentence to a sentence, or a paragraph to a paragraph, a summary is taking the whole a whole paragraph and summing it up in a sentence, or a whole journal article, and summing it up in a sentence, maybe a couple sentences, getting to the heart of it, the main central idea, right? Those are the three ways that writers take and embed evidence to support their arguments. All right, and we're going to look at how to do those. All right, so writers can use signal words when presenting evidence, such as this writer argues, or he or she asserts or contends. They emphasize, they explain, observe, they suggest, they write, quote, blah 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 blah. Right, so there's all these signal words, and those are helpful to have in your toolbox, ready to go. All right. So let's look at some embedded quotations. Now, here is the original text that we're gonna use. So we're pretending that this this sentence is what we want to use. So the text, the original text says this: as James walked to the corner store, he ran into Carmen, waiting on the sidewalk with his favorite candy and a sorrowful expression on her face. Okay, here is an embedded quotation. We start with our own words. In this case, we say Carmen exhibits her feelings for James when he finds her, quote, waiting on the sidewalk with his favorite candy and a sorrowful expression on her face. Right? And then, of course, this would be followed by analysis of Carmen's feelings for James. The key here is that we want to avoid taking this sentence and just, in our paper, let's say, wow, that was a really, that was really bad. Okay, this guy right here, we want to avoid, in this case, we want to avoid using it just word for word. And what we certainly don't want to do is in the middle of our essay, we stop writing a sentence, and then the next sentence just says this, quote, as James walked to the corner store, he ran into Carmen, et cetera, et cetera. You don't want to just take that sentence and just drop it in your paper. Here's my evidence, check, we're done. Embedding means introduce the idea, introduce the quote. Carmen exhibits her feelings for James when he finds her, then, quote, waiting on the sidewalk with his favorite candy and a sorrowful expression on her face. The quote ends the sentence, but you started it, right? That is just, it's more sophisticated, right? It's a more sophisticated way to embed a quote, right? So again, the big kind of like, hey, don't do this. The big no-no is in your essay, you're not taking a quote and it just sits on its own, right? You need to, even if it's something as simple as the author writes, quote, James walked to the corner store, he ran into Carmen. You could do it that way, right? But this is even better. This introduces the idea, right, in your own words. All right, here is a sandwiched quotation. So this is really the main kind of goal for us. What we want to do is we start with some explanation, right? So a sentence of explanation, right, goes like this. Although Carmen is someone who has made bad choices, she has redeeming qualities such as her friendship with James. Okay, let's get some evidence. Great, I have one. Quote, Carmen exhibits her feelings for James when he finds her, quote, waiting on the sidewalk with his favorite candy and a sorrowful expression on her face. And then you don't end on a quote, you always end on your own words. You speak last. Explanation, right? The writer shows that Carmen is not the dark character that she seems. She's a flawed human who has made mistakes but still has emotions, right? The quote is sandwiched in between sentences of explanation, right? And the quote doesn't sit alone. It is introduced using your words, right? Your phrasing. So that's a must. Like anytime you use evidence, that's not like a tactic you use occasionally. No, this is the way it's done. All right. So moving from the original quote, here's an embedded version. Here's the final version with some commentary or some explanation. Right. That's the idea. Okay. Let's look at paraphrasing and summary. So paraphrasing involves changing the original text, right, the phrasing, the words, and expressing it in your own words. This can be similar in length to the original, right? Whereas summarizing involves, like we said, stating the central idea or the central conclusion of the original text in your own words. This is usually much shorter in length than the original, all right? Again, maybe taking a paragraph or a whole text and summarizing it in a sentence, right? Okay. So what do we take away from here? All right. Here is, once again, how an argument is set up. And this was all about taking these pieces of evidence and making sure that we embed them, right? We embed them. So all of these pieces, this one, right? They flow from one to the next, right? And in your writing, it's not just random kind of quotes, just kind of block quotes in the middle of your writing. That doesn't show anything except you know how to kind of copy a text down, that you know how to write it out. You have to embed it. You have to surround it in your own writing, your own thought process, right? So what to take away? All right, we need to pay close attention to how a writer uses evidence, how it's woven into their writing, right? And again, that might be like it's not woven in well, and why, right? That might say something about their credibility. If nothing else, maybe their effectiveness as a writer. And we need to think about how this impacts our writing. When we are writing, never have a quote that's just sitting alone, right? It's a part of a movement. It's part of your writing, your work as a whole, all right? So James Baldwin, one of my favorite authors really of all time, he said this: I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. That's what we're trying to do as writers, right? We are taking our readers and we are pointing out things to them that maybe they have never considered. And guys, I've been teaching, a decade now, and this happens on almost a daily basis. A student points out something, and I think, I have read this poem. I mean, it must be 100 times, and I've never considered that. I've never thought about that, right? When we analyze things, when we sift through things, when we communicate our thoughts clearly, what we're doing is we're making our audience conscious of the things they don't see. And so if we can do that well, not only are you looking at a good score in the AP Lang exam, which is great, right? That's what we're trying to do. But it also just, it's beneficial for the world, right? It's beneficial for you as a person. So today's goals were understanding how writers use evidence, right? And then how it's incorporated into the writing, right? And so I hope this proved to be helpful for you. If you have any questions, as usual, you can shoot me an email. That's on my YouTube page if you need it. All right, my friends. See you next time.